All right, good afternoon. Go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for July 29, 2015. First item on our agenda is a consideration of minutes from our regular meeting of June 24, 2015. Those minutes are included with our agenda materials. Any changes to those minutes? No. All right. If not, they'll stand approved as presented. And before we get started, I want to recognize got a new staff person assisting us today, and his name is Mr. Donald Anthony. Mr. Anthony, we want to welcome you to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And so you've been with the city for how long now?
I believe that this is my 6th week with the city.
Week. All right. Are you a permanent assignment to the Board of Zoning Appeals?
I believe that is the case, yes.
Okay. All right. Very good. Mr. Lewis, got your fingers crossed over here, hoping that's true. Yeah, understandable. Yeah, well, our sympathies to you. Yeah. All right. The first application on the agenda is application Z15051 by Mr. Albert Boyce. He's requesting a 1-foot variance from the City of Murfreesboro zoning ordinance, which requires a minimum 10-foot side yard setback in a residential single-family RS-10 district. And this is for property located at 4842 Trevino Court. All right, Mr. Anthony, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, the first request today is for a 1-foot side yard setback variance for the property located at 4842 Trevino Court, which is in the Blackman Grove subdivision. This property falls within the RS-10 zoning district, which requires a minimum side yard setback of 10 feet. A recent survey obtained by the applicant indicates that the southernmost exterior wall of the existing house encroaches into the side yard setback by 3 inches on the front corner and 1 foot on the rear corner. The applicant wishes to sell the house and has run into something of a roadblock because of this encroachment. As noted in the staff report, the subject property is situated near the end of a cul-de-sac and is somewhat restrained by an awkward building envelope. The applicant attests that he was unaware of the setback encroachment until recently. If the board approves the variance request, staff recommends that the board include a condition requiring the applicant to submit a paper copy of the as-built survey and a paper copy of the variance approval letter to the Rutherford County Register of Deeds for recording. These documents should help clarify the status of the subject property for any future buyer so that they don't run into this situation again. Staff is available to answer or attempt to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Anthony. I know you've got some photographs that are included with our agenda materials. You want to try to run through those real quickly?
Sure thing. Okay. So the photograph that's up right now, this is just a front view of the house. Because it's such a small encroachment, you're not going to be able to tell a whole lot from the photography. Probably the best image that we have is going to be the actual survey that the applicant obtained. If you look very closely at the survey, this would be on your right-hand side, which would be the south. You can see the dotted line would be the setback. The solid line would be the encroachment. Looking at the rear corner of the house, you can see that's the most obvious encroachment where it goes over that dotted line. That's the 1-foot encroachment there.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Anthony? All right. Then at this time, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion or motion.
If there's no discussion, I make a motion to approve the application.
Second.
Including staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Mr. Boyce? Mr. Boyce, all right. That application has been approved. Yes, sir. All right. We'll now consider some variance and special use permit requests. First one is application Z15052 by Mr. Randy Taylor for Goodwill Industries. He's making following requests for property located in the commercial highway zone at 710 Memorial Boulevard. First, a special use permit in order to allow a temporary mobile recycling center. And then secondly, a 8-foot variance from the zoning ordinance, which permits a receptacle length up to 40 feet. All right, Mr. Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These will get a bit repetitious, so bear with us. This is the first of 3 from Goodwill Industries. Please note that due to a staffing change, Dave Bider is actually Goodwill's representative today. This request for the CH zone property located at 710 Memorial Boulevard is twofold. First, the applicant seeks a special use permit to allow a temporary mobile recycling center. Section 31A of the zoning ordinance places a 1-year limit on the duration of special use permits for this use. The applicant has operated a temporary mobile recycling center at 710 Memorial for several years. The last special permit was granted on August 1st of last year and expires in 2 days on July 31st. In the letter of application, the applicant attests that all of the criteria for a special use permit for this particular use have been met. The applicant's second request is for a variance to Section 31C1 of the zoning ordinance, which limits the receptacle length to 40 feet. The applicant's trailer is actually 48 feet in length, exceeding the maximum by 8 feet. The board has previously granted a variance to the applicant for a trailer 48 feet in length. The special use permit and the variance requests do require separate motions. And if the board approves the special use permit, staff asks that the board impose 3 conditions. First, the trailer shall not be located within a driveway aisle. Second, all parts of the trailer shall comply with the minimum 42-foot front setback requirement of the CH zone. And third, the special use permit shall be valid from August 1st, 2015 until July 31st, 2016. Staff is available for any questions.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Anthony? All right, Mr. Bider, anything you'd like to add to the application? Okay, gotcha. All right, at this time we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would come forward. Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Open the floor for further discussion or motion.
If no further questions, I'll make a motion to approve the first one, and with the recommendations set by the staff.
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. As Ms. Mosby pointed out, there's a second part of this, the 8-foot variance from the ordinance requiring receptacles to be less than 40 feet.
Make a motion to approve the second portion, subject to any staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Bider, that application has been approved. We'll now consider your second application. It's Z15053, again by Goodwill Industries, making request for a property in a commercial highway zone located at 1114 Mercury Boulevard. First of all, a special use permit to allow a temporary mobile recycling center in the commercial highway district. Second, an 8-foot variance from the ordinance which limits receptacle length to 40 feet. And finally, a 175-foot variance from the ordinance which requires that receptacles be located no closer than 300 feet to the nearest residentially zoned property. All right, Mr. Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you noted, the applicant does have 3 requests. First, as with the last case, the applicant seeks a special use permit to allow the temporary mobile recycling center. The applicant attests that all criteria for special use permit have been met, and the current permit does expire on July 31st of this year. Second request is for a variance to allow a 48-foot receptacle. The board has previously granted such a request by this applicant for this property. Finally, the applicant requests a variance from Section 31C6 of the zoning ordinance, which requires a minimum distance of 300 feet between any temporary mobile recycling center and the nearest residentially zoned property. The applicant's collection trailer is situated in a parking lot approximately 125 feet from the dividing line between the CH district and the RS10 district, the latter of which encompasses the HC Elrod's residential subdivision on 2nd Avenue. Mercury Boulevard, which is a divided 4-lane major arterial, does separate the trailer from that residential neighborhood. Staff is not aware of any complaints about the trailer from neighboring residents. If granted, this variance would reduce the separation between the trailer and the nearest residentially zoned property by 170 feet from the required 300 feet to 125 feet. Each of these three items, the special use permit, the receptacle length variance, and the distance variance, require separate votes. If the board approves the special use permit, staff recommends that it add three conditions. First, the trailer shall not be located within a driveway aisle. Second, all parts of the trailer shall comply with the minimum 42-foot front setback requirement of the CH zone. And third, the special use permit shall be valid from August 1st, 2015 until July 31st, 2016. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Anthony. Any questions for Mr. Anthony? Is this trailer in the same position it's always been?
Yeah, looking at previous photographs of it and then going out to visit the site, it appears to, at least for the last couple of years, to have been in the same place.
Okay. We're not moving it around. We've approved it in this spot before.
Correct.
And then you said earlier there's been no complaints as to this trailer. For that matter, any of the trailers that Goodwill are approving today?
We're not aware of any complaints on any of those.
Okay. And the third condition is the special use permit should be valid from August 1, 2015 to July 31, 2016. Isn't that by ordinance that they're good for a year anyway?
Yes.
Is it necessary to have a condition as part of the application if it's in the ordinance?
It's probably not necessary. We send out letters actually to the applicants with after you take action on their case, and in a lot of that information could well be helpful to them in the future in remembering a date. But we certainly you don't have to have that on there.
Okay, I'm just curious. All right, Mr. Bonner, anything you'd like to add to this application, sir? Yeah, all right, then we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? Seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed. Open the floor for further discussion or motion and talk about the special use permit, I think, first.
I'll make a motion that we approve the special use permit subject to any staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next is the 8-foot variance from the ordinance that limits receptacle length.
Mr. Chairman, if no further questions, I'll make a motion to approve the 8-foot variance with the recommendation of the conditions of the staff.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and finally, the 175-foot variance request.
Make a motion to approve the 175-foot variance, subject to any staff comments.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Biden, that application has been approved, and we'll consider your final application. It's Z15054 by Goodwill Industries, making a request for commercial highway property located at 1825 Old Fort Parkway. Again, a special use permit in order to operate a temporary mobile recycling center, and an 8-foot variance from the ordinance which limits receptacle length to 40 feet. Mr. Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This request for the property at 1825 Old Fort Parkway does mirror the request that you considered earlier for 710 Memorial Boulevard. The applicant seeks a special use permit to continue using a temporary mobile recycling center. The current permit expires on July 31st, and the applicant does attest that the existing trailer meets the zoning ordinance standards. The applicant also seeks a variance to allow a 48-foot trailer, which exceeds zoning standards by 8 feet. The board has previously granted such a variance to this applicant for this property. The special use permit and variance will require separate motions, and if you choose to approve the special use permit, staff asks that you impose the following conditions. Number 1, the trailer shall not be located within a driveway aisle. Number 2, all parts of the trailer shall comply with the minimum 42-foot front setback requirements of the CH zone. And number 3, the special use permit shall be valid from August 1st, 2015 until July 31st, 2016. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Anthony. Give me a frame of reference. I know it's on Old Fort Parkway. Is this the Walmart?
Lowe's. It's
Lowe's,
in front of Lowe's.
Okay. And this, again, is the same site that we've approved in previous years, right?
Yes, sir.
It's not moved. Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Anthony? All right. Mr. Botter, anything you'd like to add to this application? All right, then we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would come forward. And seeing no one, declare the public hearing closed. Open the floor for further discussion or motion, considering the special use permit request first.
If there's no further discussion, I move to approve the application, including staff conditions.
Second.
All right, a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and then the 8-foot variance request.
I'll make a motion that we approve the 8-foot variance request subject to any staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mr. Botter, all three of your applications have been approved. Thank you. All right, next we'll consider our final application here today is Z15055 by Mr. Clyde Roundtree of Huddleston Steel, representing Charles Smotherman, requesting a special use permit in order to allow a daycare center in a residential multifamily RM16 zone. And this is for property located at 3729 Manson Pike, which has a familiar ring to it, Mr. Anthony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, the final request today is for a special use permit for a daycare center for property at 3729 Manson Pike. As depicted in the staff report, the subject property is split between CL and RM16 zoning districts. In order to have any portion of the daycare facility on the RM16 portion of the property, the applicant does need to obtain a special use permit. The applicant attests that all of the requirements listed in Section 9 of the zoning ordinance will be met. Specifically, a proper loading zone will be provided. Vehicles will not back out onto the street. The facility will be appropriately screened, and parking will be provided on site. If the board approves the special use permit, staff recommends conditional approval with a requirement that the applicant provide a copy of the required statement from the Tennessee Department of Human Services prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. The letter shall conform to the requirements listed in Section 9D2BB3 of the zoning ordinance. I also want to note that because the property lies within the Gateway Design Overlay, a site plan for this project will have to be reviewed by the Planning Commission in the near future. And in your paper packets, and I believe on the table in front of you as well, we have included a draft site plan layout, and then in the packets there are color renderings as well. These are all draft, I think, at this point. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anthony. Questions for Mr. Anthony? Okay. Now, you weren't present with us last month, but this is the same property that we considered concerning the grass.
Yes,
the weeds
it is the
exemption,
same.
right?
It's
Part of it.
The grass exemption would do a larger, would apply to all these parcels, and the proposed daycare is only on a portion of this property.
Okay. It looks like are you talking about the 3 tracks then? It looks like
Yes.
there's a total of 3 tracks, right?
Right.
Is the daycare then going to be limited to just one of those 3 tracks?
I believe that their intent is to replat these at some point in the future, and so the daycare is actually on the street frontage on Manson Pike, but it crosses over all 3 of those tracks.
That's
Okay.
what I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it going to be there where that house is already standing there?
Yes, and in that same
Same
general
area.
area,
Okay.
right?
Okay. And you're saying that these 3 tracks are a blend of commercial, local, and RM16.
That's correct.
Is this use a matter of right in commercial local?
Yes, it is.
They don't need a special use permit for that. It's just because part of this property is RM16.
Correct.
Okay. And on one side, it looks like the west side, Andrea Brook Court. If that's the west side, yeah, I think it is. Okay. That's residential. And then on the east side, it's residential multifamily. But you got this little node of commercial local right there. You see, I'm looking at that right there.
Yes, sir. The commercial local is just that small part of it.
Was that rezoned?
I don't recall it being, it may have been that from the get-go.
Clyde, can you help us out on the zoning on this?
Clyde Roundtree with Huddleston Steel Engineering, Chairman Rogers and board members. I believe the zoning really splits to two parcels as far as the project. It splits the CL. The CL is what I believe is an old residual zoning from the county. I think it's been kind of an older zone, and but like you said, it's by right for the CL, and that's the area we need the special use permit. But I think the special use permit's also related to the fact that it's in the gateway. After dealing with Donald and Margaret Ann and the staff, they said that this is the first kind of daycare center inside the gateway, so that also has a little bit of an impact on why we're seeking the special use permit. So if that helps a little bit.
In looking at that, it looks like just about half or maybe a third of one tract is CL. But I'm not familiar with a procedure where you can just rezone a third of a tract. Can you?
It can. It's unusual, but
Okay.
it has been done.
And it wouldn't have come out of the county because the county doesn't rezone. It's all residential. They don't rezone. Probably they just do issue permits,
Do you
right?
recall when this was redone, Randy?
It was rezoned in the county back when Mr. Davidson was in, and it was a proposed project that was going to happen, and then with changes in the economy and so forth, didn't proceed, but the zoning did, and then when it came into the city, it came zoned commercial. Originally, that whole tract was zoned commercial, but somewhere along the line with Joseph, I think they decided just to make the front half commercial with the city. And that's kind of the reason you have that smaller node there.
Okay, so it looks like the property's in 3 different tracts.
Well, there's actually 4 tracts to this whole parcel of 40-something acres, but the part that this pertains to is 2 tracts.
Okay. Are they the 2 tracts on the west side or 2 tracts on the east side?
Going out Mansion Pike, when you cross over the creek bridge, the first track is right next to the creek there. And then the next track is actually just the track that the house sits on.
I don't know if we can get this on the camera, but Chairman, here's the existing property line, one of them, and then the other existing property line is over here. This is the part that's now zoned commercial local. The rest of this is zoned RM16, so this project would touch all 3 of the lots at the road frontage, but it doesn't take up all 3 of them. It's, what, a third of the commercial local lot, all of this next lot, and then a 20, 30 foot off of the third lot.
Okay.
So the zoning line currently is right here. So when this was zoned this way, it was not, well, only a portion of this lot apparently was zoned, which is not too unusual. The zone, the first 300 foot or so is commercial, and the rest of it is something else.
Also in the gateway overlay, it's proposed for just the front section of that, and I think that's when the zoning was done that way. The front section of all these parcels to be commercial, and the rear section to be high-density housing. And so that's probably the reason it's done that way also.
Are you gonna replat this into one tract?
You talking about the daycare itself? Yes, matter of fact, I'm Charles Smotherman, but Skipper Smotherman is going to be the actual builder of the daycare. And so it will be plotted into one track, yes.
Okay. And will it be sold into the daycare?
Uh-huh,
Not leased, okay.
yes.
Yeah, this would have to be replatted to create this, the site as a separate lot of record in order to go forward. They would have to do that.
It appears there's a proposed property line on this map. Is that
Right.
approximately where that is, or is that just a
Yeah, the property line is pretty much arbitrary on the backside
Okay.
to accommodate the needs that we had with the GDO requirements for buffers and setbacks and those things. So that's a little bit flexible, but it is what it needs to be for us to get through GDO.
okay?
Any other questions? All right. And at this time, thank you, gentlemen. At this time, then, we'll conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application? If you would, state your name and your address for us, please.
My name is Greg Phillips. I live at 3868 Andrea Brook Court. Good afternoon, Chairman Rogers and board members. My property, from what you had up there earlier, I live right on the cul-de-sac there on Andrea Brook. My backyard is directly adjacent to the RM16, the multifamily there. My wife and I aren't necessarily opposed to the daycare. After speaking with Mr. Smotherman earlier, our questions were, where exactly was it going to be on those properties? How close to our property was it going to be? A daycare would be a better neighbor than a lot of other things that could be there. One of our main concerns is we're hoping that it's not a slippery slope, that this appeal, if it goes through, somebody else comes through and they want the RM16 there and they want a special use permit for something else, and then somebody else wants it for something else, and then the next thing you know, there's a bunch of different things there that's on that RM16. I know that part of it is there on the commercial property, which is, not a problem for us, but we just don't want it to become over the years that, okay, well, because this one was granted, well, we should grant this one also because we've already set a precedent for it. And that's really our main concern. The other concern, like I said, was how close it was going to be. Now that I see exactly where it is, we really don't have a problem with where it is. But we also don't want continued special use permits for what's supposed to be the RM16 there. And that's really all I had. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. All right. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against the application? All right. Then we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for further discussion.
I have a question. In trying to answer Mr. Phillips' question, give us an idea of what this board would grant as special uses in a residential zone. We know daycares, we know churches, correct?
Correct. I don't have my
Okay.
zoning ordinance with me, so we're going to
In your
have to rely
chart,
on Anthony's. But
in your
one thing I would
materials, you
comment
have
is-
a chart
We do?
that
Okay.
shows special use permits. Special use permits are classified as an S that have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Then the X's are outright permitted in a RM16 zone. Chart.
Could we provide that to Mr. Phillips?
Sure.
I would state to Mr. Phillips that certainly my experience here with the BZA over the last about 10 years, I think each request is going to be judged on its merits. And the fact that a special use permit has been granted for one thing, I don't think would be at all persuasive if someone comes in and asks for a special use permit for something unrelated. If there's another daycare, that might be persuasive, that seems to be a good fit. But even at that, I think the board would look at the location, the proximity, the setback requirements, and everything about it. So the fact that one is granted is not going to be a precedent, if you will, to say, well, okay, we did one, so we'll do another one. It really wouldn't work that way. Each request is going to be looked at on its own merit.
And I agree with you, Mr. Eisen. I think his question was a good one also about where on the property it's going to be located. And
I think he said that had been answered, right? But you now understand where it is from, right?
is that this proposed property line, so they're not going to replat it as 3 down to 1. It's going
No.
to be 3 down to 2, I guess.
It actually could go from 3 to 4. They would have to create a lot for the daycare center, and what they choose to do with the remnant of those 3 existing lots. I'm not sure if they've even determined that yet. But for right now, you have 3. You would be carving out a 4th out of those 3. So then you would still have the 3.
Okay, I'm completely and utterly lost as to where this is going to go on this property and what this property is going to look like after it's built. And I don't know, Clyde, if you want to take this and show me, or maybe, that's what I've got to look at right now as far as the tracks go.
If you look at the site plan, this little jet out where the property actually has this little notch, that's right. It's right. That parking lot fits in that notch. So you're basically.
I see existing property.
Yeah, that's that notch right there. If you see that little notch, that corner.
Oh, okay. I got you.
So it's breaching. In a sense, it's kind of come over there a little bit, and then the driveway's kind of over here. So it really straddles. But that's your furthest out point. But that's your reference point. That notch is that notch, and it tapers down a little bit and comes back.
Okay.
So you see the way the corner of the building kind of breaches over that whole corner.
Okay. So is your plan then to take and replat this into something that looks like, a lot like that?
We would reflect the property line of it. Again, the property line was really generated by the requirements for the GDO in terms of how much parking we needed, how much buffer. So right now, we have a property line proposed there. If we need to change that to make something clearer, but I think they could still possibly have parcel this in the future and use that for another use if they wanted to. But
Okay.
parking was the biggest requirement to try to meet the needs for that.
And what about the property on the west side then here? This is the proposed property line is going to extend over here. Right? You got a lot of green space right here, open space. But it doesn't extend all the way over to
No,
the
I
west.
think it just comes, we don't really come to here.
Oh,
We just
okay.
come to what's required.
Okay. And
They'd
so,
be creating just another lot over there, a future lot for future.
So that's barely touching then the biggest
Yeah.
chunk of the
Oh,
RM16.
yeah, it's really justified much to the
Pretty
west
good
side.
distance between, for now, from
Yeah, if you
where
look
he
at
is.
this reference line, I mean, we're barely, it's right there.
okay.
So we're barely breaching it on this side.
Yeah, maybe by, I don't know, 10 feet or so, right? Okay.
Probably 20, yeah, because there's a 15-foot buffer, and there's the property line, so I'd say we're probably 20 to 22 feet coming into that RM16 side.
Okay.
And this is floodplain, and we get into some floodplain issues as well, so that's kind of the reason why we pushed it that far over, because we had to get out of it. There's a creek here that we have to respect, so we had to make sure that your flood control is in play.
Okay.
So that's kind of what justified us moving it over.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Helps. So I think then to answer Mr. Phillips' question about where it's going to be, no more than, say, 10 to 20 feet then into that big RM16 lot on the west side.
Right.
Okay. All right. And the concern is obviously is that it's surrounded entirely, except for that small note of commercial, surrounded entirely by residential property, right? So we're really
Multifamily.
multifamily, but
right.
we're really establishing this is a commercial use now in the middle of essentially residential property, and it's the first establishment of commercial use. It's surrounded entirely by residential property.
It is, and a cemetery across the street,
Okay.
small cemetery.
And I think, and it's a low-intensity commercial use, not commercial highway, certainly, commercial local. I think that's the lowest of the commercial uses, and adjacent to multifamily, which is usually considered a pretty good stepping stone from a heavier commercial to a lighter local commercial to multifamily onto single family, which is what we would have here.
Do you know, is that RM16 property to the east, is it developed? At
Yeah.
RM16, there's like an apartment complex on it or something?
Is that?
Overhead up there.
Integra Creek.
Yeah, that's in Integra Creek.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay.
Might add that if the daycare were to move away, a commercial business like a convenience market couldn't begin operating because it would it's zone it would have to be zone commercial. It would still retain its residential multifamily zoning, so it could be used as a another daycare or something multifamily permitted use. But
And if this daycare were operating, any expansion of it would require BZA approval, wouldn't it?
yeah, it's still in an RM16, so it would, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I don't have the document in front of me, but there's been a document, I think, produced that shows the overall encompassment of the GDO overlay, that their ambition was for that area to go towards more of a commercial application in the future as far as how the overlay works. It didn't reflect in the current zoning. And I don't have that document in front of us, but there's a little catalyst. I mean, the Smothermans have a history with child care centers. They know how to run that program. So they feel like the location's solid because of the surrounding neighborhoods, and it'll service those residences that are close by, both Integra Creek and all the upcoming subdivisions. But there is, again, I'm sorry I don't have it with me, but there's some sort of an overlay that projected Manson Pike to go towards more of a commercial application down towards the end of the GDO. So if that helps a little bit about why that location as well.
Okay. Thank you. But I am concerned, though, that the only concern is kind of what Mr. Phillips said, that we're injecting commercial into an otherwise generally entirely residential area. But and I agree with Mr. Ives. This simply by if we establish this, it's not in any way nod that other commercial property has a green light to go in or around this particular property.
Correct. And I think it would be, if we were starting from scratch today with just having annexed this property and no zoning on it at all, it would be a fairly common approach to zone the first 300 or so feet of road frontage all the way across as either commercial highway, commercial or commercial local, some commercial, and then to zone the property behind it multifamily, which is in fact what the Planning Commission has done on a substantial portion of the land along Memorial Boulevard on the west side that had come into the city years ago as RS15, it's our standard zoning if you don't ask for something else. And fairly recently, in the last couple of years, there have been a number of rezonings out there where the first about 300 feet of road frontage has been zoned commercial highway with the expectation of some fairly intense commercial uses of shop. You know, these aren't going to be huge lots, so but shopping center type uses and restaurants, multifamily behind that, and then on behind that the existing single family subdivisions. So that's a fairly common approach along a major road, which Manson Pike is maybe not quite as major a road now as Memorial, but it is still a significant commercial road. In fact, I think that's 5-lane all the way through there, isn't it? Yeah,
Manson Pike?
Yeah, right. Yeah, Manson Pike's now a 5-lane thoroughfare, so yeah, you would consider that to be a...
No, I
I
don't.
feel like it was three. It was three.
Is it
on
just
our-
3?
On our
Three.
I think one day it might
Okay,
be.
we've got right away for 5, but it's only 3 at this point.
Okay. All right. That's good. Then we've done the public hearing. All right. So any other questions? Any other discussion? Are we ready for a motion?
Well, I'm ready to make a motion unless somebody else. I'll make a motion that we approve the application subject to any and all staff comments.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that application has been approved. All right, now we're on to staff reports and other business. Any staff reports, any other business?
I have nothing.
Mr. Anthony?
Nope.
All right. Mr. Lewis? All right, then we're adjourned.